Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into a really complex story about political power, hidden money, and the systems, sometimes very slick, sometimes almost unbelievably basic, that let huge fortunes just vanish offshore.
Yeah, and we're focusing specifically on Pakistan's powerful Sharif family. It's a story with huge implications.
Right. Our sources really throw us straight into the deep end, don't they? With Nawaz Sharif, who was prime minister 3 times.
3 times, yeah. And his finance minister, Ishakar, both disqualified from office, a unanimous verdict from 5 judges, which is pretty decisive.
And the reason? The court found they weren't, and this is the official language, honest and sagacious.
Which is quite a statement from the judiciary. It really sets the scene.
It absolutely does. But as you said, this goes way beyond just one family's political troubles. It's almost a case study, really.
Exactly. It mirrors how political dynasties, particularly in the developing world, can allegedly use offshore secrecy, these opaque structures, to hide wealth. Wealth that often seems disconnected from, their known income sources.
That link between political power and financial secrecy, that's what we're trying to untangle for you today.
And to really understand the origins of this wealth, we actually need to look back. Not just at offshore accounts, but at policy decisions made years ago.
Back to the 1990s, during Sharif's earlier terms as prime minister.
That's what the sources suggest, yeah. That the groundwork for the alleged corruption was laid back then.
Okay, so what specific policies are we talking about? How did they allegedly facilitate this?
Well, the big one mentioned repeatedly is the privatization of state-owned industries.
Privatization. Always a tricky area.
Definitely. And the allegation here is that state companies were systematically, almost deliberately portrayed as making losses.
To drive down their value.
Precisely. So they could then be reportedly sold off at bargain prices to political allies, friends, business associates connected to Nawaz Sharif.
That sounds less like economic reform and more like, well, like capturing state assets for private benefit. Is this a common playbook we see elsewhere?
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes. It's a pattern seen in many places. You devalue state assets, sell them to insiders, and then maybe even tweak the laws to protect the profits.
And speaking of laws.
Right. Sources say the Sharif government also passed a law that basically stopped Pakistani tax authorities from asking questions about the source of money coming into Pakistan from abroad.
Wow. So that essentially created a shield. Money could flow in, and its origins couldn't be easily investigated domestically.
That seems to be the effect, yes. It potentially turned Pakistan into a sort of safe haven for funds, regardless of where they came from.
Okay, and this wasn't just happening at arm's length, was it? The sources emphasized this was very much a family affair.
Very much so. You see direct links to family-owned businesses like the Adabia paper mill and especially the Ramzan sugar mill. That one comes up again and again.
The Ramzan sugar mill. Why is that one so significant?
Because Shahbaz Sharif, that's Nawaz's brother, who was the powerful chief minister of Punjab province at the time, he's accused of laundering huge sums, tens of millions of dollars, through Ramzan Sugar.
And his son was CEO.
His son, Shahbaz Sharif, yes. He is chief executive there, so a very tight family connection.
So millions allegedly moving through the family business. But the method they reportedly used to move some of this money domestically, that's perhaps the most shocking part.
It really is. The low-wage employee scheme, it kind of beggars belief.
Why use, clerks and T-boys instead of sophisticated financial channels? What does that tell us?
It suggests maybe immense confidence that the local system wouldn't just fail to catch them, but might actively protect them. It shows how corruption can exploit institutional weakness and, frankly, the vulnerability of ordinary people.
So break down how that scheme actually worked.
Okay, so investigators found that bank accounts were opened, but in the names of very low-level employees at the sugar mill, people earning tiny salaries, often not even enough to pay income tax.
Right.
Then, large amounts of money completely out of proportion to their salaries were deposited into these accounts.
And then what happened to the money?
It was then allegedly routed onwards, eventually landing in the accounts of Sharif family members themselves. Hamza, Solomon, and Shahbaz Sharif are named.
And the sources give a really specific, quite tragic example, don't they? Masood Anwar, a T-boy.
Yes, Masood Anwar worked at the Ramzan sugar mill. His annual salary was apparently around $300. Just think about that.
$300 a year.
Yet, investigators found evidence suggesting he was used to deposit enormous sums into accounts linked to Shahbaz Sharif while Shahbaz was chief minister.
How much are we talking about?
In 2017 alone, examples include deposits of 1.6 million rupees, and another of 90 lakh rupees. That's 9 million rupees.
That's hundreds of times his annual salary. It's just staggering.
It really highlights the human cost and the sheer scale.
And what about the banks? Surely someone must have noticed these huge, suspicious transactions going through accounts of people earning virtually nothing.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But when investigators started asking questions, they apparently ran into a wall of silence, or worse. Well, sources mentioned investigators being told stories about people showing up at banks with gunmen to intimidate staff.
Wow.
Others reported receiving direct calls from very senior bank executives, basically telling them to look the other way. It suggests the banking system itself, or parts of it, might have been complicit.
So not just negligence, but potentially active participation in covering it up.
That's certainly the picture painted by the sources. A system possibly compromised from top to bottom.
Which explains perhaps why the joint investigation team ultimately concluded that Nawaz Sharif just couldn't account for his family's assets based on their known income.
Exactly. And in the later criminal trial about those London flats, the famous Avonfield properties, he reportedly failed completely to explain where the money to buy them came from.
And that inability to explain the wealth, especially the London properties, leads us neatly to the next big chapter: the Panama Papers.
Absolutely. That leak was a global bombshell, wasn't it?
It really was, and it directly named 3 of Sharif's children.
Yes, connecting them to ownership of these prime London properties, all held through those typical offshore companies set up in places like the British Virgin Islands.
But the attempt to explain away that ownership led to one of the most, well, almost farcical moments in this whole saga.
Ah, you mean the Calibri font incident?
The Calibri font incident. Explain that one.
Okay, so Sharif's daughter, Mariam Nawaz, tried to argue she wasn't the beneficial owner of the properties, just a trustee.
Right.
And to prove this, her legal team submitted documents, trust deeds, supposedly signed back in 2006.
Okay, it seems straightforward enough.
Except investigators noticed something. The font used in these official documents was Calibri.
And the problem with Calibri is?
The problem is that Microsoft Calibri font wasn't widely commercially available until 2007.
Oh dear. So the documents claiming to be from 2006 were typed in a font that didn't exist for public use back then.
Precisely. It was a tiny digital detail, but it strongly suggested the documents were created much later and backdated. A major forensic slip-up.
That's incredible. It really underlines the lengths they allegedly went to obscure who owned what and when. And it points to massive amounts of money leaving Pakistan.
Huge amounts. The family's total wealth is still a subject of speculation, but they're often cited among the top 5 richest families in Pakistan. Yet their official tax filings were reportedly quite low over the years.
Which implies significant capital flight. And where did a lot of that capital apparently fly to?
Well, London seems to be a key destination.
It comes up again and again. After Nawaz Sharif was convicted, he got bail for medical reasons, went to London.
And he stayed there ever since, refusing to return to Pakistan to serve his sentence. He claims it was all a political conspiracy orchestrated by the military.
And he's not the only family member there, is he? London's become something of a hub for Sharifs who are wanted back in Pakistan.
That's right. Figures like Ishaq Dar, the former finance minister, Rabia Imran, several family members or close associates facing charges in Pakistan have found refuge in London.
Our sources basically describe London as the go-to place for what they call politically exposed persons, or PPs. Why London?
Primarily because of the financial secrecy offered, especially through British overseas territories and crown dependencies. Think BVI, Cayman Islands, Jersey. They make it incredibly difficult to trace the real owners of assets. It's been called a money launderer's paradise for this reason.
Which creates this really uncomfortable dynamic, doesn't it? You have Western countries, particularly the UK, being seen as, well, maybe enabling or even benefiting from this alleged laundering of public funds from developing nations.
There's definitely that perception. London is often called the wealth capital of the world. One source mentioned an estimate of over 84,000 properties in the UK owned anonymously through offshore companies.
84,000, that's a huge number.
It is, and it highlights what critics call a major double standard.
How so?
Well, look at Pakistan. It was placed on the FATF gray list, that's the Financial Action Task Force, basically for having weak controls against money laundering and terror financing. Huge international pressure.
Okay, so Pakistan is under pressure to clean up its act.
Right. But then, when Pakistan tries to get help tracing stolen assets hidden abroad, say, they send mutual legal assistance requests to Switzerland or even the UK. What happens?
What does happen?
Often, according to the sources, they get stonewalled. They receive requests back asking for specific bank account numbers or highly detailed information.
Information that Pakistan probably doesn't have precisely because the money was laundered specifically to hide those details.
Exactly. It's a catch-22. And the sources noted that key UK agencies, like the Home Office and the National Crime Agency, declined to comment on any investigations into Sharif's UK assets. It feeds that perception of unwillingness to act.
And didn't Imran Khan, when he was prime minister, make this point very forcefully?
He did. He argued that rich countries effectively benefit from the billions stolen from poorer nations, that money flows into Western property markets, luxury goods, financial institutions.
So there's little real incentive for them to return it or crack down hard on the individuals involved.
That was his argument. He said, money laundering should be treated just as seriously as terror financing or drug trafficking.
Because those directly harm Western interests, so the laws are tough. But money stolen from developing countries often ends up boosting Western economies, so less urgency.
That's the uncomfortable argument being made, yes. That the flow of dirty money isn't seen as a problem when it flows in their direction.
Which brings us to the political fallout in Pakistan more recently, after Imran Khan was removed from office in 2022.
He made those claims about a foreign-backed conspiracy, didn't he? Pointing fingers at the U.S. State Department, specifically mentioning Donald Liu working with the opposition.
Right, claims the U.S. strongly denied. But regardless of the conspiracy theories, what happened next, once Nawaz Sharif became prime minister, is crucial.
Absolutely. This is where sources talk about the implementation of the Sharif doctrine.
The Sharif doctrine, what does that mean in practice?
It's described as a strategy to build and maintain power by gaining influence across key institutions, the media, retired military figures, the judiciary.
To create a narrative that only the Sharif family can provide stability and save the country.
Essentially, yes. To make themselves seem indispensable, despite the corruption allegations, and critically, to potentially secure immunity.
And did we see concrete steps toward that immunity?
Very quickly, yes. One of the very first major legislative acts of Nawaz Sharif's coalition government in June 2022 was to push through amendments to the National Accountability Bureau, or NAB, law.
ND being Pakistan's main anti-corruption agency.
Correct. And these amendments, which were retrospective, significantly weakened NAB's powers, especially concerning white-collar crime allegedly involving politicians and bureaucrats.
How did they weaken it?
They changed thresholds for cases, shifted the burden of proof, things like that. But there was one clause that sent a real chill through the investigating community.
Which was?
The amendment introduced the threat of up to 5 years imprisonment for NAB officers if they were deemed to have filed a false reference against someone.
So the investigators themselves could face jail time if their case didn't succeed or was challenged. That puts immense pressure on them not to pursue powerful figures.
Exactly. It's seen by critics as a way to intimidate investigators and effectively paralyze anti-corruption efforts against the political elite.
The legislative changes were fast, but the human impact, according to the sources, was even more immediate and deeply concerning.
Tragically so. The sources report some really alarming incidents involving key figures in the Ramzan sugar mills investigation shortly after the change in government.
Tell us about that.
Dr. Mohammed Rizwan, who was a lead investigator on that case, a man only 47 years old, reportedly died of a sudden heart attack.
Right after the new government took power.
Yes. And then another investigator involved in the same case also suffered a severe heart attack and was left in critical condition.
That's disturbing.
It gets worse. Remember Masood Anwar, the T-boy whose account was allegedly used for laundering?
Yes, the man earning $300 a year.
After cooperating with the investigators, providing crucial evidence, he also reportedly died of a heart attack shortly after the government change.
3 key figures connected to that specific investigation, all suffering fatal or near-fatal heart attacks in quick succession. The sources clearly imply this wasn't just tragic coincidence.
The pattern is certainly presented as deeply suspicious, suggesting potentially fatal consequences for those who got too close to exposing the alleged corruption network.
So pulling this all together, what's the big takeaway for you, our listener? This story, the Sharif family saga, it really serves as a powerful, detailed example of that connection we talked about at the start.
Right. The link between entrenched political power in a developing nation and the mechanisms of global finance, particularly the secrecy offered by jurisdictions like London. It's a cycle where wealth is allegedly extracted, hidden abroad, and the system makes it incredibly hard to investigate or recover.
Damaging the country of origin while potentially benefiting the destination countries and protecting the powerful individuals involved.
And that leaves us with one final, quite pointed paradox for you to think about.
Go on.
The sources mention that not long after Imran Khan was removed from power and the Sharif coalition took over, the FATF, the same body that had Pakistan on its gray list, announced that Pakistan had suddenly met all the necessary compliance requirements.
And Pakistan was subsequently removed from the gray list.
Yes. So, the final thought is this. Given everything we've discussed, the massive scale of alleged illicit financial flows, the difficulty poor countries face in getting stolen assets back, the clear advantages rich countries gain from this inbound capital.
How do we square that circle? How should the international community reconcile putting intense pressure on countries like Pakistan to fix their systems while seemingly tolerating or even benefiting from the lack of transparency in the very places where that stolen wealth ends up?
That's the fundamental double standard, the core contradiction that this deep dive really forces us all to confront.